Depending on who you ask, Israel's presence in the West Bank is either a territorial dispute, historic right, military occupation, security measure, or political tool. The word often used to describe the situation is occupation, but the term carries a wide range of ideas and assumptions, stuffing centuries of history into a difficult reality. So is there one accurate way to understand the term occupation? And is it fair to label Israel as an occupying power?
When you grow up with liberal Zionism around you, you think of the occupation as military presence within the Palestinian territories, the modern day West Bank. And that's kind of how I thought about it for most of my life, the occupation, the military, the huge, massive military presence within the West Bank. And then I got to college and people started referring to the occupation as the entirety of Eretz Israel. They were the occupied Palestine. And I remember just being so confused.
The word occupation brings to mind historic military powers like Nazi Germany invading Europe, or the British Empire's foothold in Egypt and India. The term was used in the 1949 Geneva Convention to describe rules of war, specifically the responsibilities of an occupying power to the civilian population being occupied. It can be descriptive, cynical, or sinister, but it can hardly be used without judgment. To some Arab leaders, the Israeli occupation was born with the land Israel gained after the 1948 war for its independence, meaning Jewish rights to any of the land is invalid, the Jewish state is illegitimate, and all of Israel is occupied. But the territories are not stolen land that came under Israel's control, immorally or illegally. Jewish heritage for 3,500 years emerged from the territory of Judea and Samaria, which today is known as the West Bank. It's the birthplace of the Jewish people, the focus of Jewish culture and spirituality, and a Jewish kingdom ruled the land for close to a millennium. Judea was named after the biblical tribe of Judah, from which the word Jew is derived. The land is deeply Jewish. But Israel does impose military rule on a Palestinian population with limited independence. So Palestinian Arabs are a group living under a form of occupation.
When you think about peace and you think about what you are willing to do for peace, I think if there has to be some sort of sacrifice, Jews can go visit, but they can't physically sit down and live in X area, I would be overjoyed if that meant nobody died anymore.
After Israel's stunning victory in '48, neighboring Arab states that rejected Israel's right to exist organized terror attacks that targeted Jews, perpetrated in large part by displaced Arabs living in the West Bank, then a part of Jordan. In 1967, Egypt, Syria, and other surrounding countries began mobilizing troops along Israel's borders, threatening annihilation and forcing Israel into another conflict, the Six-Day War. In a quick and decisive victory, Israel defeated the Arab states again. Jordan was warned to stay out of the war, but it attacked anyway. The Israeli Defense Forces pushed the Jordanians back beyond the '48 borders, regaining control of Judea and Samaria for the first time in 2,000 years, and most notably Jerusalem, the heart of Jewish heritage for 3,500 years. For most outsiders, occupation is defined as Israeli control of the land gained during the Six-Day War, and this is when the word began to go mainstream in relation to Israel. As terrorism in the West Bank against Jews increased, Israeli leaders determined they needed to maintain a military presence in the area. A really complex security dynamic emerged as a result. Arab terror attacks, resentment of the Jewish state, and resistance to Israeli soldiers patrolling the West Bank escalated, spilling over into more intense violence, leading Israel to increase security measures. And the cycle continued. Israelis were divided on how to handle the territory and 3 million Arabs living there at the time. Some supported withdrawal in exchange for peace they hoped Arab countries would agree to. Others, euphoric over the reunification of Jerusalem and control over the land of their Jewish heritage, wanted to stay. Ultimately, Israel proposed a formal peace with Egypt and Syria. 8 Arab nations came together to issue their unified and now infamous response in the 3 no's of the Khartoum Resolution. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiations with Israel. This was consistent with a formal call for Palestinian nationalism that came in 1964, 3 years before the Six-Day War began. The Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, defined its mission as an armed struggle to liberate all of Palestine from the river to the sea. With Israel-Arab relations effectively stalled, and a new generation of Palestinian Arabs coming of age as refugees, the PLO used terrorism from day one to realize a vision of Palestinian sovereignty at the expense of Jewish sovereignty. In other words, wiping Israel off the map. All of these elements, multiple wars, religious ideology, a desire for peace and prosperity, terror attacks and human rights, are ingredients in a pressure cooker that constantly explodes.
It's such a complicated issue because there's such a fine line between security and military, like way too over militaristic, military occupation.
So is it fair to use the word occupation or not? The official stance of the Israeli government is that using the term occupation to describe the situation in the West Bank is legally incorrect. When Israel and Jordan signed a peace treaty in 1994, Jordan, in fact, gave up the West Bank and the 2 countries established a new international border that runs right through the Dead Sea. The Israeli Supreme Court, however, views the term occupation as legitimate, in so much as Jordan's 1948 annexation of the West Bank was never recognized by the Arab League, Palestinian Arabs' assumed representatives at the time. The question isn't only about getting the legal definition of occupation right, but also about the shared history of the land. To sidestep Jews' rightful claim to the land by calling Israel an occupier is unfair and manipulative because of the oppressive military power it's meant to evoke. Not that this invalidates Palestinians' historical ties to the West Bank or other areas of Israel. Many Israelis and much of the international community accept the legitimacy of Arab heritage as a connection point to the land, as they've been a majority in it for centuries. In the past, Israel has proposed a 2-state solution in acknowledgement of this connection, and a desire to live in peace with its neighbors, but a peace deal remains elusive. When it comes to the sensitive politics of the Middle East, language can have a deep impact on government policy, human rights, and even cost lives. In our next episode, we'll examine another hot-button word used in relation to Israel in order to understand its relevance to the country's past, present, and future: apartheid.